I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom.
And I'm Krysta, and I'm the daughter.
And together we are Family Plot. Well, yeah. Well, and I'm not even sick like I normally am, but in the head, I've got this flu-y crud.
Yeah, I would say it's the flu. For sure.
It doesn't feel like COVID anyway.
Pretty awful. Pretty awful.
Yep, pretty awful. So, what can we start with? Well, if y'all want to help the show, you can do that a few ways. You can do a monthly donation through Patreon, or you can do a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee. If you can't afford to do that, well, you can share the show on social media. In fact, that's what we say. If you enjoy the show, please share it on social media. If you don't enjoy the show, just keep that to yourself. Yeah, so let's get into our topic. Our mantra here is true crime, folklore, history, and the paranormal. These are the things we talk about. And tonight, to some extent, we will cover all four. Tonight, we talk about Alcatraz, also known as the Rock. This infamous prison has a history of housing the worst of the worst, and some dangerous inmates strode through its halls. And some of those inmates have never left, if the stories that visitors, former guards, and former inmates tell are all true. And while the legend stands that the prison was impregnable, or at the very least, escape-proof, there is even an asterisk to that story, if things are to be believed. So join us tonight as we discuss Alcatraz in this legendary episode of the Family Plot Podcast. Yay! That was nice. And unfortunately, our Krysta does not have facts tonight. I wish I had a sad noise to put in here. A wah wah. Oh, yeah. So we're just going to get into it. Now, at one point, the island was home to Native Americans, and they left the island. Something happened on there that was so bad they left the island. And many people believe that they felt like some supernatural creature had taken possession of the island, and that's why they left. And we'll get back to that later. Now, in 1775, Juan Manuel de Ayala led an expedition that sailed into San Francisco Bay. He was the first in recorded history to visit the bay, and he named one of the three islands Alcatrazes.
Sounds like a magic man.
And after a while, that name became anglicized to Alcatraz. Yep. And while the meaning of the name is still debated, most agree it means pelican or strange bird. Now, in 1850, a presidential order set aside the island for possible military use. The gold rush and the concurrent rise of San Francisco as a city and population center led the Army to establish a fortress, often referred to as the Citadel, at the topmost portion of the island. They also were planning to install over 100 cannons. making the island the most heavily fortified military site on the West Coast. Along with Fort Point and Lime Point, Alcatraz was considered part of a triangle of defense. Now, in the late 1850s, the first military prisoners were being housed on the island. As the need for its military fortifications waned, they never fired their cannons in battle. It was used once more as a prison. In 1909, the Army tore down the citadel and, using its basement as a starting point, began to build the prison. Actually, the military prisoners built the prison. So,
well, free labor and all.
Yep. In 1911, the inmates finished its construction, and it was dubbed the Pacific Branch U.S. Disciplinary Barracks for the U.S. Army. Yeah. Now, in 1933, which, that's a 22-year jump, the island was sold to the Department of Prisons as opposed to the military. Yep. So, yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, for 22 years it was home to military prisoners, but in 1933, the island was transferred to the control of the Department of Justice and the Board of Prisons to create a new maximum security, minimum privilege prison to combat the rampant crime of the 1920s and 30s. Yeah. The Department of Justice wanted the public to know that they took imprisoning these criminals quite seriously.
Yes, no, Apollo.
Now, this is going to be a little longer episode just because Alcatraz there's just so much to the history of this place. So, let's take a moment for a word from our sponsors. And how do you feel? Good to know. Good to know. Ooh, aha.
You got lost.
I did. I got lost. Well,
it's okay. We could find him. There's breadcrumbs and stuff.
Yep. Well, I can find me sometimes.
Or sausages.
Is that the heat that I'm hearing?
Sausages?
No, the heat. Is the heat on?
Yes, that's the heater. Yes,
okay.
It is. Are you still cold?
I am still cold.
I'm on the heater.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Ooh. Ah. Okay.
I had it on this morning for a while.
Well, aren't you a smart lady? Alcatraz was home to prisoners that were violent, dangerous, considered escape risks, or simply could not be controlled at other institutions. Alcatraz only held 336 prisoners maximum. Though it never had more than 275 at any given time. Alcatraz held less than 1% of the total prison population in the U.S. While popular culture often depicts the Rock as a U.S. version of Devil's Island, which was an infamous French prison located in French Guiana, famous for its rough treatment of inmates, Alcatraz was intended to be a prison system's prison. There were never more than one to a cell in Alcatraz, something that many prisoners considered to be a great thing. But incoming prisoners had 4 basic rights: rights to food, clothing, shelter, and medical treatment. Everything else was a privilege that had to be earned. Working, corresponding with, and having visits from family members, access to the prison library, and recreational activities such as painting and music were all privileges an inmate could earn by following the rules. So, yeah, it was a pretty serious place.
Yeah.
Now, on March 23rd, 1963, Alcatraz was closed. Partially this was due to extensive repairs to the prison needed to continue to operate. Also in part due to the expense in operating the prison, as everything from food to clothes to prison supplies to 1 million gallons of fresh water each week had to be delivered to the island by boat. This was very expensive, so the prison was closed.
Sure.
Now, in 1969, a group of Native Americans claimed Alcatraz as native land with the hope to build a cultural center and an education complex on the island. The Indian of all tribes used their act of civil disobedience to illustrate the troubles faced by Native Americans. Initially, public support for the Native Americans' cause was strong, and thousands of people, general public, school children, celebrities, hippies, Vietnam War protesters, Hells Angels, came to the island over the next 18 months. Unfortunately, the small Native American leadership group could not control the situation, and much damage occurred. Graffiti, vandalism, and a fire that destroyed the lighthouse keeper's home, the warden's home, and the officers' club. In June 1971, federal marshals removed the remaining Native Americans from the island.
Ooh, they kicked them out.
Yep. In 1972, the island was transferred to the control of the National Park Service, and Alcatraz was a part of that. Now the Alcatraz prison is a tourist destination and is one of the most popular visits in the National Park Service. So, let's talk about famous inmates, because Alcatraz had a bunch of them.
Well, yeah.
Probably no one more famous than the Birdman of Alcatraz, although he never kept birds while he was in Alcatraz. The island's, his name was actually Robert Stroud. He spent 54 years of his life behind bars.
And made chicken.
Well, no, actually he kept birds when he was in Leavenworth. Oh, yeah, that's right. Stroud's there. Yeah, Stroud's has great chicken. I mean, if you're ever in Kansas City.
You said bird and Stroud, and I thought,
Yeah.
and made chicken. It was, you got it out. It wasn't as funny as my brain told me it was.
And in 1909, Stroud was convicted of manslaughter while serving his prison sentence at the U.S. Penitentiary McNeil Island in Washington. He viciously murdered a Leavenworth guard and was convicted of first-degree... Wait a minute. I got lost here. Oh, he viciously attacked another inmate. Sorry. This resulted in his transfer to USP Leavenworth in Kansas in 1916. He murdered a Leavenworth guard, was convicted of first-degree murder, and received a death sentence. His mother pleaded for his life, and in 1920, President Woodrow Wilson commuted the death sentence to life imprisonment. It was Stroud's violent behavior that earned him time in segregation. During his 30 years at Leavenworth, he developed his interest in birds and eventually wrote 2 books about canaries and their diseases. Initially, prison officials allowed Stroud's bird studies because it was seen as a constructive use of his time. However, contraband items were found hidden in the bird cages, and prison officials discovered that equipment Stroud had requested for his scientific studies had actually been used to construct a still for homebrew. Stroud was transferred to Alcatraz in 1942, where he spent the next 17 years, 6 years in segregation in D Block, and 11 years in the prison hospital. In 1959, he was transferred to the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, where he died on November 21st, 1963. So that's the...
Oh, what the heck?
So that's one famous prisoner. Let's look at another. Al Capone.
See, I think Al Capone was way more famous than the bird. I'm just me, personally.
To Americans of the 1920s and 30s, he was the notorious gangster Scarface. At Al, public enemy number one. But when he arrived at Alcatraz in late August of 1934, Alphonse Al Capone took on a more humbling name, Prisoner 85. As Prisoner 85, Al Capone led a very different life from his...
I'm pretty sure he made them call him Mr. Prisoner 85.
Well, as Prisoner 85, as I said, he was leading a very different life from his freewheeling days at the top of the Chicago racket. He became a serious reader, a musician, and a composer. A model prisoner, he kept a low profile, did his prison chores, and rarely resorted to violence unless he was provoked. In one instance, bashing a fellow inmate's head with a bedpan. Al also began to have wild mood swings and violent episodes as his syphilis began to affect his mind. Well, he'd had syphilis from way back when he was running prostitutes.
Well, dirty gangster sex, and I don't know what to tell you. You need to wrap it before you trap it. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly. Thank you for that word of advice.
Absolutely.
That's our Pete.
That's motherly advice right there. You got to wrap it up before you stick it in anything. What? You better wrap it up before anybody sticks anything in you too.
No, that wasn't it. That was what? That was me just realizing what you said.
Well, yeah.
Now, many think Al's time at Alcatraz was mostly to justify the prison's expense to the public, showing that if it could keep a mobster like Capone in line, then there wasn't a prisoner it couldn't break.
Sure. That's one way of looking at it.
God, I love you. So let's talk about another prisoner, and one we may have to talk about because he was quite active in the Kansas City area at one point. George Machine Gun Kelly.
Yep, good old Kelly.
Another famous gangster, a bank robber, and a kidnapper. He began his prison term in 1933 by bragging to the press that he would escape prison, break out his wife, and they would spend Christmas together. The decision was made to take these threats seriously, and thus he was sent to Alcatraz.
Yeah, that's one way to get out of spending the holidays with your in-laws.
Yep. Arriving on September 4th, 1934, they would be among the first groups of prisoners. Kelly became AZ number 117. At Alcatraz, Kelly was constantly boasting about several robberies and murders that he had never committed, although this was said to be an apparent point of frustration for several fellow prisoners. Warden Johnson considered him a model inmate. His life at Alcatraz was largely uneventful. He took a job as an altar boy in the prison chapel.
Sorry.
Worked in the laundry. held an administrative role in the industry's office for a long period and generally served out his time quietly. Warden Johnson made statements that Kelly would become depressed when receiving mail from family members, but rarely failed to write his full quota of letters. He seemed to feel remorse for his crimes and always felt that his wife, Catherine, and his other accomplices were treated too harshly. So, and another person we might wind up talking about, because a lot of his crimes wound up in the Kansas City area, Alvin Francis Creepy Karpowitz.
That was a mouthful.
Yep. Born Alvin Karpowitz, better known as Alvin Karpus and nicknamed Creepy for his sinister smile, he was an American criminal known for his alliance with the Barker Gang in the 1930s. He spent a lot of time in and around Kansas City, so we may do a future episode on him. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Karpus was incarcerated at USP Alcatraz from August 1936 to April 1962. Although he did enjoy a short absence from Alcatraz during a 6-month transfer to Leavenworth in 1958. Karpus served his time quietly at Alcatraz, though he was considered far from being a model inmate by correctional officers. Former Alcatraz officer Al Bloomquist called Karpus a mild nuisance and described him as an inmate who complained frequently about the conditions and one who fought constantly with fellow inmates. He was also known as an obsessive reader and held numerous positions in the Alcatraz industries and a kitchen assignment. Now, Alvin Karpus had kidnapped at one point a man by the name of George Hamm, Hamm, who was big in the Hamm's beer industry. So, it is rumored that when baseball games were broadcasted inside the cell house in the late 1950s, Karpus would bellow in laughter when the Hamm's jingle, because there was a beer called Hamm's, played during commercial breaks. While Karpus is renowned for being the prisoner with the longest sentence at Alcatraz, he never attempted escape. In April 1962, with Alcatraz in the process of being closed, he was transferred to McNeil Island Penitentiary in Washington State. Now let's talk about another member of the Barker Gang, Arthur Doc Barker. A member of the Ma Barker Gang, Doc was captured a year after his brothers had been killed by the police. Barker was sentenced to life in prison and was first sent to the Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas. Later, he was sent to the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco, California. On the night of January 13, 1939, Arthur Barker, along with Henry Young and Rufus McCain, attempted to escape from Alcatraz. Their plans failed and Barker was shot and killed by the guards. Young and McCain were recaptured and sent to solitary confinement. So that's just a handful of the more famous inmates that spent time at Alcatraz. Yep. Yeah, you don't mess with the Rock, pretty much, is what I'm getting.
Well, I mean, if you do, you end up under it.
Yeah.
So that's just some of the names.
Right.
And we talked about it being closed.
Right.
But wait, there's more to the story.
Oh, yeah, because we have to talk about the escape attempts. And
the haunting.
Yes. Well, there were 14 escape attempts in all. Let's start with Joe Bowers. April 27th, 1936, while working his job burning trash at the incinerator, Joe Bowers began climbing up and over the chain link fence at the island's edge. After refusing orders to climb back down, Bowers was shot by a correctional officer stationed in the West Road Guard Tower, then fell about 50 to 100 feet to the shore below. He died from his injuries. Now let's talk about Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe. December 16th, 1937, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe worked in the mat shop, the material shop, in Model Industries building. Over a period of time, while working in that shop, they filed their way through the flat iron bars on the window. After climbing through the window, they made their way down to the water's edge and disappeared into San Francisco Bay. This attempt occurred during a bad storm, and the bay's currents were especially fast and strong. Most people believe Rowe and Cole were swept out to sea. Officially, they're listed as missing and presumed dead. Now, we should talk about here that San Francisco Bay is home to many kinds of sharks.
Many sharks.
Including bull sharks and tiger sharks, both of whom are considered highly aggressive.
And many.
Yes. Well, if you remember last week's episode, sharks played a big part in that, and tiger sharks were one of the sharks that were attacking the survivors of the Indianapolis. So, yeah, they turn up again in this episode.
There you go.
Sharks just won't stay out of our show.
Not bite.
Now let's talk about James Limerick, Jimmy Lucas, and Rufus Franklin. This happened in May 23rd, 1938. While at work in the woodworking shop in the Model Industries building, James Limerick, Jimmy Lucas, and Rufus Franklin attacked unarmed correctional officer Royal Klein with a hammer. Klein died from his injuries. The three then climbed to the roof in an attempt to disarm the correctional officer in the roof tower. The officer, Harold Stites, shot Limerick and Franklin. Limerick died from his injuries. Lucas and Franklin received life sentences for Klein's murder. Now, on January 13th, 1939, this is when Doc Barker, Dale Stamphill, William Martin, Henry Young, and Rufus McCain attempted to escape. They escaped from the isolation unit in the cell house by sawing through the iron cell bars and bending tool-proof bars in a window. They then made their way down to the water's edge. Correctional officers found the men at the shoreline on the west side of the island. Martin Young McCain surrendered, while Barker and Stamphill were shot when they refused to surrender. Barker died from his injuries.
We're sorry, Barker.
Yeah.
We're sorry. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you try to break out of prison, but you know. Yeah.
And let's take another moment for a word from our sponsors.
Hey, honey.
Yes.
I feel extra sponsored.
Awesome. So, continuing with the escapes, because we're not done.
Of course not, because, why would you stop there?
Joe Kretzer, Sam Shockley, Arnold Kyle, and Lloyd Barkdahl. May 21st, 1941. These four men took several correctional officers hostage while working in the industries area. The officers, including Paul Madigan, who later became Alcatraz's third warden, were able to convince the four that they could not escape, and the four men surrendered. So that's almost not even an escape attempt.
Yeah, they thought they started to, and they thought better of it.
Well, they were talked out of it.
Well, similar.
Yeah. John Bayliss, September 15th, 1941. While on garbage detail, John Bayless attempted to escape. He gave up shortly upon entering the cold water of San Francisco Bay. Later, while appearing in federal court in San Francisco, Bayless tried again, unsuccessfully, to escape from the courtroom. Bayless just had that never say die spirit.
Well, yeah.
Which, if he'd had it on the outside, might have kept him from winding up in Alcatraz.
Probably not.
James Borman, Harold Brest, Floyd Hamilton, and Fred Hunter. You know, Fred Hamilton didn't have his own musical.
No?
No.
No, well, that's because he wasn't Alexander.
True. Plus, you know, Lin-Manuel Miranda is not a big fan of prisoners, I would guess.
Hey, mate, no, I'm not going to speak to that. But
These 4 men took 2 officers hostage while at work in the industries area. The 4 climbed out a window and made their way down to the water's edge. One of the hostages was able to alert other officers to the escape, and shots were fired at Borman, Brest, and Hamilton, who were swimming away from the island. Hunter and Brest were both apprehended. Borman was hit by gunfire and sank below the water before officers were able to reach him. His body was never recovered. Hamilton was initially presumed drowned. However, after hiding out for 2 days in a small shoreline cave, Hamilton made his way back to the industries area, where he was discovered by correctional officers. Guess he was going to try to get supplies or something? I don't know.
who knows?
Why would you go back? I mean,
Maybe he got hungry.
Could be.
Like a puppy.
yeah, could be.
Come home, he got hungry.
Yeah, that could be. Huron Ted Walters, August 7th, 1943. He disappeared from the prison laundry building. He was caught at the shoreline before he could even attempt to enter San Francisco Bay.
Well, that probably was the best.
John okay, I'm not sure if this is pronounced Giles or Giles. Giles. John.
It sounds like.
Okay, John Giles, July 31st, 1945. In one of the most ingenious attempts, John was able to take advantage of his job working at the loading dock, where he unloaded Army laundry sent to the island to be cleaned. Over time, he stole an entire Army uniform. Dressed in the uniform, Giles calmly walked aboard an Army launch to what he thought was freedom. He was discovered missing almost immediately. Unfortunately for Giles, the launch was headed for Angel Island, not San Francisco, as Giles hoped. As Giles set foot on Angel Island, he was met by correctional officers who returned him to Alcatraz.
Oops. Yeah, it was a nice try, dude.
It's good. It's pretty ingenious, but it's still
Didn't go the way he planned. Didn't quite work out from the way he thought.
so. What they call the Battle of Alcatraz, or the Alcatraz Blast Out, happened between May 2nd and 4th, 1946. During this incident, known as the Battle of Alcatraz, 6 prisoners were able to overpower cell house officers and gain access to weapons and cell house keys, in effect taking control of the cell house. Their plan began to fall apart when the inmates found they did not have the key to unlock the recreation yard door. Shortly thereafter, prison officials discovered the escape attempt. Instead of giving up, Bernard Coy, Joe Kretzer, there's Joe Kretzer again, Marvin Hubbard, Sam Shockley, Myron Thompson, and Clarence Carnes decided to fight. Eventually, Shockley, Thompson, and Carnes returned to their cells, but not before the officers taken hostage were shot at point blank range by Kretzer, encouraged by Shockley and Thompson. One officer, William Miller, died from his injuries. A second officer, Harold Stites, who stopped the third escape attempt, was shot and killed, attempting to regain control of the cell house. About 18 officers were injured during the escape attempt. The U.S. Marines were eventually called out to assist, and on May 4th, the escape attempt ended with the discovery of the bodies of Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard. Shockley, Thompson, Carnes stood trial for the death of the officers. Shockley and Thompson received the death penalty and were executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin in December 1948. Carnes, who was 19 years old at the time, received a second life sentence. So he already wasn't getting out, but now they made it extra. He's not getting out. Because he was serving what they call natural life. Floyd Wilson, July 23rd, 1956. Floyd disappeared from his job at the dock. After hiding for several hours among large rocks along the shoreline, he was discovered and surrendered. What about it, Krysta? You wanna try to escape from the rock? You sure?
Yeah. I'd rather.
Sounds like too much work.
Okay, let's talk about Aaron Burgett and Clyde Johnson. September 29, 1958. While working on garbage detail, Burgett and Johnson overpowered a correctional officer and attempted to swim from the island. Johnson was caught in the water, but Burgett disappeared. An intensive search turned up nothing. Burgett's body was found floating in the bay 2 weeks later. So, in a way, he escaped. Not in the way you want to, but in a way. All right. So, we have a big one to talk about here. And it's probably the biggest escape attempt that we know of from Alcatraz. The guys involved were Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin. This was June 11th of 1962. Now, it was made...
Opposed to Zach Morris, who got involved.
Yes. Now, this was made famous by Clint Eastwood in the movie Escape from Alcatraz. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin vanished from their cells and were never seen again. A fourth man, Alan West, believed by some people to have been the mastermind, was also involved. However, he was still in his cell the next morning when the escape was discovered. An investigation revealed an intricate escape plot that involved homemade drills to enlarge vent holes, false wall segments, and realistic dummy heads, complete with human hair, placed in the bed so the inmates wouldn't be missed during the nighttime counts. The three men exited through the vent holes located in the rear wall of their cell. They had enlarged the vent holes and made false vent wall segments to conceal their work. Behind the rear wall of the cells is a utility corridor that had locked steel doors at either end. The three men climbed the utility pipes to the top of the cell block and gained access to the roof through an air vent. The men had previously bent the iron bars that blocked the access to the vent. They then climbed down a drain pipe on the northern end of the cell house and made their way to the water. It is believed they left from the northeast side of the island, near the powerhouse quartermaster building. And they were ingenious because they had also built a raft out of raincoats, essentially.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, a cell house search turned up the drill heads, the wall segments, and other tools, while the water search found 2 life vests, one in the bay, the other outside Golden Gate, oars and letters and photographs belonging to the Anglins that had been carefully wrapped to be watertight, but no sign of the men was found. Several weeks later, a man's body, dressed in blue clothing similar to the prison uniform, was found a short distance up the coast from San Francisco, but the body was too badly deteriorated to be identified. Morris and Anglins are officially listed as missing and presumed drowned. Now, there is an update to this. Not listed among the missing items on the FBI's report was 150 feet of electrical cord. Furthermore, a launch went out at night to take home guards, visitors, and prison employees. It is believed that the three men hooked their raft to this launch using that cord. And Josh Gates, along with two other men, was on a makeshift raft being towed by a boat. They made it to Angel Island, from where they could have.
I'm sorry. Did you say
I did say Josh Gates. But the point is that they made the distance, being towed by a boat in a makeshift raft. So the Anglins and Morris could have done this so as well.
Fair enough. I just couldn't let you mention that.
Oh, it's fine. He's my man crush. I'll go there.
You went
From there, it is believed the men went to Mickey Cohen, the mob boss known as the King of Los Angeles, who helped the men get to Brazil, where photos of the men were taken, and archaeological evidence does appear to back up this claim. Further, the photos, when compared to pictures of the escapees, come up as a 99% match. So,
plot thickens.
yeah. So it's not a slam dunk, but it certainly appears that the rock being escape-proof has an asterisk to it.
An asterisk.
Yes.
That word is too hard to say.
But I had a friend who couldn't say statistics. It always came out statistics.
Mm.
So, yeah, if there was a successful escape, it was those three guys. But they put the work in. Oh, my. That's the most extensive escape plan that there was.
Yeah.
It
wasn't just jump in the water and try to get away. It was like
thought out, yeah.
Yeah.
John Paul Scott and Darrell Parker, December 16th, 1962. John Paul Scott and Darrell Parker bent the bars of a kitchen window in the cell house basement, climbed out, and made their way down to the water. Parker was discovered in a small outcropping of rock a short distance from the island. Scott attempted to swim towards San Francisco, but the currents began pulling him out to sea. He was found by several teenagers on the rocks near Port Point, beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and was taken to the military hospital at the Presidio, our army base, suffering from shock and hypothermia before being returned to Alcatraz.
Yeah, at least they saved his life.
Oh, yeah, his life was saved, but the escape attempt, well, let's just say it didn't go nearly as well as the Morris and Anglin's escape attempt did.
Yeah.
No Mickey Cohen sending him to Brazil. Hauntings. Now, there are multiple hauntings at Alcatraz. We will list some of the more famous ones here. Al Capone's former cell is a place where, while orbs are frequently viewed, and I'm saying viewed for a reason, not filmed or photographed, viewed. So, yeah. And banjo music is often heard here, which is what Al enjoyed when he was incarcerated there. Plink, 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 banjo music.
Mm-hmm.
Which I wouldn't have thought, Al Capone would be into, but whatever. Now, some say the haunting is Al himself, whose soul was somehow brought back there after death to serve a longer sentence prescribed by someone mightier and more powerful than the U.S. government. God.
And how long was he there?
He was there just a few years, but he died in his home in Florida. Probably complications from syphilis, which had stirred his brains but good at that point. The old lighthouse. Now, the old lighthouse was torn down before Alcatraz became a prison. However, since then, many have seen the building lit and standing proud in the foggy nights and bad storms, which is the first time I've ever heard of a building doing the haunting. Shadow men, full-bodied apparitions, voices, and cold spots have been reported throughout Alcatraz. Furthermore, photos taken at the former prison often include people who were not there at the time the photograph was taken. A man wearing a cape and a top hat and carrying a cane with him has been seen strolling through D Block, especially in D Block, which were the punishment cells. Alcatraz didn't have a hole per se. What they had were these punishment cells in D Block, which is basically you'd be stuck in a cell away from everybody else. And depending on how bad your infraction was, they might take your mattress during the day so you couldn't lay down on it. Some of the cells didn't have toilets. You just a hole for doing your business. Yeah. So there were wasn't a great place. Now let's talk about cell D14. Something bad dwells here. Some people think it's the same thing that drove the Indians from the island before the Spanish came. An inmate was sent to this cell. Now remember, D14, one of the punishment cells. And he was sent to D14 for some infraction. And soon he began to scream that something was locked in the room with him. Now the guards ignored this. They thought he was just trying to get their attention, trying to get out. They just ignored his cries. In the morning, he was found dead, his neck showing signs of strangulation.
Yeah, just attention my bootski. Sound like somebody wanted him taken out.
In the morning, he was found dead, his neck showing signs of strangulation.
Right. You said that.
Yeah.
And again, I said that sounds like somebody wanted him taken out.
Right. Well, he had been claiming that there was someone in there with him that he could see glowing eyes. The coroner insisted that strangulation was not self-inflicted. Since then, many have seen the glowing-eyed apparition, and those mediums and psychics who have experienced it claim it isn't human. It never was. And that is our show on Alcatraz so far.
Wow.
So, Krysta, your thoughts? It is, but, you might have thoughts about it, or, like, the prisoners or the inmates, or building a prison that you had to boat in fresh water to.
I think people should be open.
That's a good opinion.
Hun, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Don't break the law. And if you're gonna break the law and go to prison, wrap it up. something so you don't get syphilis and go crazy.
Well, that's just the thing. Al got it young. He got it young and never got it treated, which is crazy to me because it can, even then it could have been treated, I think. But it can be treated up to a point. If it gets too far, it begins to stir your brains. Yeah. And at that point, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah. I don't know. You know,
Okay, let me ask you a question.
sure.
Morris and the Anglins, do you think they escaped?
I don't think so.
Even with the photographic evidence?
You know, how many people say they have photographs of Elvis Presley after he died?
Well, I have a couple, but I mean, they were taken in Vegas, so I have to doubt their veracity a bit.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Krysta? Morris and the Anglins, do you think they escaped and survived, or?
It's a possibility, but I think it's for because
I was just asking for your best guess.
my best guess is sure.
Overall, I really enjoyed the research I did on this, I gotta say.
Yeah, you got like 3 new show topic ideas just from researching this one, which I think is awesome.
Well, I just
Also,
didn't.
what did you do to make your cat mad?
I don't know.
I don't either. He doesn't usually come over and sleep next to me during the show. Yet, here he is.
Maybe you're moving less than I am?
I don't know. Maybe he just knows that I already made the call that he gets to move with us. And
Could
so
be.
he's buttering me up.
Could be. Could be. He could be thankful. Anything's possible.
He's purring even, which never happens.
And, he's kind of a mama's cat, too.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's very rare, actually, but every once in a while.
He's like a grown-up's cat. He doesn't want to play. He's not.
In 2 weeks. Here's something we can add to the show.
Okay.
In 2 weeks, we will be recording the show from our new home and a totally new area to record from.
Exactly.
That's cool.
That is going to be cool.
Something to look forward to.
Well, something to believe in, as that band sang. Poison. It was Poison. Ugh. Yuck. I'm not a fan of Bret Michaels. Anyway. Yeah. So. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely.
We hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks to Bill Barrett, who does our music. If you need music for a project, Bill's your guy. You can reach him at Bill Barrett, that's BEHRENDT, at sbcglobal.net. Thanks to Paige Elmore, who, along with our own Krysta, does our logo art.
Paige.
Also, thanks to Aaron Gnerk of the Big Dumb Fun Show, who promotes us locally. Join us next week as we examine the Stanley Hotel.
Stanley Hotel! How exciting!
Yeah, the Stanley Hotel is the hotel that
I know what it is.
I was just going to explain to Krysta.
Okay.
It's the hotel
You know what it is?
I think it's just a hotel.
It's a hotel that the movie Shining, the hotel in that movie was based off of. This incredibly haunted hotel. And like famous people have stayed there. Like Stephen King stayed in room, I want to say it's like 127 or something, which is where he got the idea for The Shining. Jim Carrey tried to stay in that room, and 2 hours later came down and demanded a different room
Fun.
because he couldn't handle the haunting. So, yeah. I'm looking forward to that. A good haunted. Yeah.
Well, we are getting down to the holidays.
Yeah, well, it's a good ghost story for Christmas is what I was thinking, you know.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening, as always. Bye.
Bye.